All right, so welcome to the day 2 of the workshop. I want to get started with welcoming our keynote speaker, Professor Sanjay Sarma, who is a wonderful colleague and professor at MIT Mechanical Engineering. And Sanjay will talk about learning humans versus machines. Sanjay, please.
Thank you very much, Faiz. It's a pleasure to be here. I really had a great time yesterday, a great learning experience. The organizers unwisely gave me an hour. So at some point, I will break into a rant. In fact, the whole presentation is a rant. Bear with me. All right. I actually had ChatGPT drop that image, and it's intended to sort of convey what I'm going to say. I want to show you something. This is public investment in learning. Machines versus human. Okay, and the striking thing is, yes, thank God, we actually do spend more on learning, human education than on machines. But look at the growth rate in the bottom row. What you will see is that our investment in education is growing at 2 or 3%, but our investment in AI is growing, it's doubling every 1 or 2 years. And this is not just government funding, it's corporate funding, the whole shebang. And I'll argue today that this is leading to, we're on a primrose path to a tragedy. So it's a little bit, I would say, not depressing, but hopefully a little bit controversial what I'm going to say. I'll begin by talking about historically how we have evolved as a species, especially in the last 150 years. The last 150 years, I will argue, has been about turning humans into robots. And we've really succeeded at it. How did it come to pass? If you look at the human endeavor, right, the complex space of things we can do mental things and we can do physical things. And the physical things, we can do routine things and we can do sort of complex, creative things. Now, if you take manufacturing, which we're apparently trying to bring back to this country, spinning, weaving, forging, right? All the mechanical stuff of the Industrial Revolution, that's where that fell. These routine manufacturing things. Hands, fingers, shoulders. What are complex mental things, which are physically not so complex? Well, it's doing something no one else thought about. Why did Confucius suddenly out of the blue conceive of the things he did? Or I happen to be a huge fan of Malala Yousafzai. It's not like I don't like Einstein, but for her to stand up in a bus and say, I'm going to go to school is exceptional for a young woman. These are things that are, they fall in the category of do not compute. And actually one of the things that's happening is we're falling into the trap of does compute. And one of the things humans do is does not compute. What are complex physical things? Dance, sports, ballet, right? And then you have things that are mentally and physically complex, like composing and playing a whole new class of music. Or, as in Auguste Rodin, right? Sort of creating a whole new category of sculpture. By the way, the truth is his less famous partner, Camille, I forgot her last name, deserves about as much credit as he does, but that's a whole other story. Now, if you look at historically what we've done is we have been on a mission to roboticize, right? And this is how we kicked off the Industrial Revolution. We automated these things. And when we did, we ran into a paradox. So this paradox, many of you may have heard of it. It's called Moravec's paradox. How many of you have heard of it? It's very interesting, right? It's the paradox is that many people have written about it. Moravec is the first guy, but Steven Pinker, others have talked about it. What humans find easy, computers find hard. And what computers find easy, humans find hard. Sort of a weird thing. And so when the Industrial Revolution was taking off in Europe, and the colonial period was devastating. I say this as someone who grew up in India. It was devastating for all but the very top of the British and the European aristocracy. For everyone else, it was terrible. There was the opium trade in China, the salt marches in India, right? Africa was devastated. South America was devastated. It was the very top. But if you just look at Europe, these are all Europeans. Europeans working in the Industrial Revolution ran into Moravec's paradox. You needed human beings to do that last mile of things machines couldn't do. Machines could automate spinning, they could automate weaving, forging, printing, but you needed the fingers, a little bit of the brain, because we can automate it, because of Moravec's paradox. So humans were recruited to fill the fine motor and cognitive skills needed for automation. And essentially, humans were the robots. And that Industrial Revolution laid the groundwork of what was to follow. The Industrial Revolution then came to America. One of the people responsible for that is Lowell. There's a town in Massachusetts called Lowell. Lowell actually stole, by the way, the technology for spinning from England and brought it to Massachusetts. And that's how Massachusetts became the center for the clothing industry, for the fabric industry, textiles. By the way, the word textile has the same root as technology. Textiles was our first technology. So what we did was, we took that routine stuff and we said, we need a little bit more intellectual stuff, just a little layer. And we added it on, right, for clerical services. We also needed it, or Europe needed it to run the empire. The clerks to run India, China, well, not China so much, but China was taken over through the opium trade, but other parts of the world, South America, etc. And a little bit needed fine motor skills because robots and automation couldn't do the fine stuff. And so we expanded it. And that completed the factory. And unfortunately, and by the way, then Ford was taking off. A guy called Taylor started automating the factory. And that's the Charlie Chaplin movie, where he shows you how comical and tragic it was, modern times. It's worth watching. That's a metaphor, right? He's become a robot, can't be turned off. I'll stop. By the way, Charlie Chaplin was declared a communist during the McCarthy era, right? I'm not some raging socialist, but the point is he was making fun of the issues with automation. We turned humans into robots, and that was social commentary 100 years ago. So what we did was, unfortunately, this is what our education system also reflected. So our education system is actually two-tier. The first tier is this stuff. and we call it vocational education. Now, I'm coining a phrase here. There's a second tier, and that is what I call avocational education. That was the class system. So if you were I'm going to use terminology here that's intentionally provocative. If you're a rich Anglo-Saxon WASP young man in New England, and you wanted to meet your future father-in-law and impress your father-in-law with your knowledge of Virgil, so that you could then, marry his daughter and inherit the empire. It was male-dominated, right? That's what it was, right? You went to Harvard. I'm an MIT guy, so I can say all this. I gave the same talk at Harvard, by the way. Well, I used the same reference. But for the rest of the world, it was the vocational stuff. That was for the creamy layer. The Virgil wasn't intended for the young man who would grow up, or the young woman who would work in a spinning mill. Now, just as an aside, when MIT was founded, and by the way, I should say that over the years we expanded a little bit, right? Added a little bit more layers of humanities. If you go to ABIT accreditation, they say you got to get a humanities education. Just the interesting little aside on MIT. Yesterday, Faiz, we're both MIT guys, so I'll sort of talk about MIT. Faiz talked about Tony Stark in Jarvis. Did you know Tony Stark is an MIT alum? But do you know why he's called Tony Stark? He's named after John Stark Draper, from whom Draper Labs comes. He was the guy who did all the guidance systems for munitions, and was spun out of MIT, became Draper Labs, and he was the original Iron Man, and that's how the name comes. But actually, the funny thing about MIT is it was established in the shadow of Harvard, right? And there's a little lesson there, actually, because it's 1861. Civil War began right after. Military and technology were very intertwined. A lot of technology came out of the military. And what they did was they said, you know what, we have the guy with the sledgehammer and the person with the book. And it says right here, sciences and arts. So the idea actually was to try and cover the whole curriculum, the whole thing. It wasn't one class and another class. The idea was to mix it all up. And in fact, even today at MIT, if you graduate with an engineering degree, you need to take 8 humanities courses, which is more than Harvard. I'm done picking on Harvard, by the way. So our modern education system is that. It sort of strips away everything but the essence. We train robots. It's also, in many ways, rooted on products. What do you do with products? You test them. There's a testing system, right? You make them interchangeable. If the product is too creative and starts asking irritating questions, that's a problem. So I like this cartoon in the bottom, right, where students come in with aspirations and they graduate as interchangeable parts. In fact, I would argue that the Industrial Revolution ended with interchangeable people, and we are still stuck in that. So we have very successfully turned humans into robots. Now, I've shown you a Charlie Chaplin cartoon. The only thing that is better than that is a video of a kitten. So I'm going to show you one. The fact is, that's not how education is supposed to work. In fact, all mammals educate their cubs, their kids. That's the mammalian compromise. Are young, are immature for much longer, and therefore much more adaptable. Teaching is a mammalian instinct. Learning is a mammalian instinct. So I want to show you this 2 or 3 minute video on how cats learn. And tell me if it looks anything like how we teach, and then I'll start my rant.
In just 3 weeks. But this is where spiders and cats differ. Though physically the cats are now quite developed, their predatory programming is incomplete. Now, to start developing the mind. First, their instinct makes them curious. Instinct makes them play. Play links body with mind. They start to look like predators, focused, fast, alert. But at this stage, the rules are simple. Catch anything that moves. After all, they could be anywhere, and anything could be prey. But a cat can't live on feathers and stones. This simple instinct needs a focus. Enter Mother. She now comes back from hunts with dead prey. This is the new focus of the kitten's play. The kittens get what she can catch, a sample of the world of prey outside. She is programming the predatory machine, preparing it for future hunting. Sight, smell, feel, taste. This is what should be eaten. For the next stage, live prey.
I hope you're not queasy, but don't worry, there's
Now
no
the mind
blood
is
here.
focused on specific prey, a lesson in handling. How fast is it? How does it move? How do you catch it? Without this training, kittens will never be good hunters. This time, the vole escapes. Finally, into the field to put training into practice. They go into the outside world with skills that basic instinct can't provide alone. They have the advantage of learning. The predator hunts, fueled by instinct, fine-tuned by learning.
So that's how we're supposed to learn. That's how we're evolved to learn. Learning isn't something humans made up in the last 200 years. 300 years ago, we were all farmers and we learned from our parents.
These kittens
Whatever we did.
are just a deal.
I'm going to stop here and just say that the way we are naturally evolved to learn, all the neuroscience backs this up, and I've written books about it, is you have an expert and you have a novice. And the novice learns by observing the expert. The kitten never received a lecture. It learned by this magical thing called learning, which we're trying to mimic with machine learning. And what the cat did was it gave scaffolding, because first stones, then a dead mouse, a vole is a type of a mouse, and then a semi-dead mouse, and then finally the completely undead mouse, right? And the learning is entirely implicit. It is not explicit. The trap we have fallen into, and this is the rant, is that what we've done is we've taken this, which is how we're supposed to learn, and by the way, every parent knows this. This is how your kids learn from you. You know this instinctively, right? You would never teach your kid through lectures. It's mimicking. They're mimicking you. You're modeling. A little bit of gentle coaching. We know this. It's amazing how easily we forget it. What has happened is, as human knowledge has expanded, we've created another route. That is explicit knowledge. So what's happened with human knowledge is we have figured out how to explicitize knowledge. And we started generating a lot of new knowledge. Once we create explicit knowledge, by the way, there's a technical term for it. It's called cognitive task analysis. Great sports coaches know how to give you techniques to hit the better tennis stroke, the better golf swing. It's cognitive task analysis. And because once you have that explicit knowledge, you can distill it, create scaffolding, create a curriculum, and then we deliver it to the novice, and that's called teaching. Now the thing is, and by the way, it's become even more necessary because with technical advances, explicit knowledge has exploded. So you can't teach machine learning by sheer implicit, mimic me sort of thing, right? There's so much to convey, it sort of made sense. But the problem is, that was meant to be an accelerant, not a replacement. It was meant to support what we naturally yearn for and we're good at. And instead, what has happened is we have taken this explicit knowledge, we have fetishized it, right? We teach. Teach is a verb. You hit someone, you teach someone, right? And we have then, rather than treating it as an accelerant, we have removed the implicit channel. And the result is, and by the way, there's an expression at MIT that Paul Gray, the former president, used. He said, coming to MIT is like drinking from a fire hose. And we're very proud of it. We have plaques saying that. I hate it. I think it's a tragedy. I think that you're going to point a fire hose at a young person and, pick the survivors and say, you made it, is a statement of failure. We should be feeding them in a way that makes sense. And then we have completely taken away the implicit in coaching. Actually, MIT still does a pretty good job, but I think overall in education, we've taken it away. And we need to fix this, and the way to fix it is to put back the scaffolding and coaching and implicit learning and let students build motivation in a world model. So that's my little rant. The irony is AI, modern AI, large language models, unsupervised learning, is all implicit learning. And that's why I had the picture right in the beginning of AI reading a book, right? While people walk by. Because like the eye of Sauron, ChatGPT is scouring the internet for things to read. It's reading the humanities, it's reading, Virgil, it's doing all the stuff we stripped away from our education. And therefore it has advantages now that we don't have. And the fact of the matter is, the failure we have is we've started teaching, we've not started 100 years ago, we started treating the human mind as a vessel to be filled. It's almost as if the professor has a pen, the student's brain is a piece of paper, you write on it, declare victory, do a test. If they pass, you go, my God, you're good. And if they don't pass you, you're a failure. You should go work in a factory. That's the system we've evolved to. That is the Industrial Revolution, right? And what is actually happening is the student is building a model of the world, and teaching is merely an accelerant. And as I said, every parent knows that, and we need to bring back all the things that make humans what they are. And the idea there is to get away from this model, replace teaching with learning, and bring back this coaching and implicit learning. So that's what we need to do. Okay. Now let's talk about robots. We've spent 100 years teaching robots how to be human, after spending 100 years turning humans into robots, right? And obviously the videos I'm going to show you in this audience are no surprise, so I'll skip over them, go quickly. But I just want to say one thing, which is what is truly exciting and scary about generative AI? Is it the generative part? No, not so much, actually, except in this audience. This is the first time in this group that I've seen generative stuff that is exciting. When you generate a new design, when you generate a new shape, a new concept. But actually, generating cartoons like the one I showed you that I put in the opening slide, big deal. To me, the most exciting thing about generative AI is that natural language processing, right? That was what attention models, self-attention was supposed to do, and it sort of blew us away, right? And I don't know how many of you have seen these restaurant robots, right? Asia is full of them. I was president of a school in Malaysia for a few years, and I just came back a few months ago. This robot sort of scurries around the cafeteria there. They have a bunch of them, and I asked the restaurant manager, he says, you have no idea how good these things are. They don't take breaks. They don't unionize. They don't have visa problems. And the issue that these things have is that today they don't speak. Now add, imagine if they could talk and tell you they're out of pepperoni or whatever, right? And they could take payments. He was telling me he would cut, 80% of his restaurant busing staff, right? So that's the second thing, right? The second thing that's happened is these things weren't supposed to show up with knowledge, and they did. And that's pretty shocking, I suppose we've realized now how much language encodes knowledge. Language isn't just this talking thing. It is actually knowledge. It's a sort of profound thing. And its ability to deal with unstructured data is stunning. I think that's something we don't give enough credit for. And then, of course, there's execution, agentic AI. But anyway, come back to that. I think you've all seen what's happening with AI, so I won't. Have you seen the physical intelligence video? How many of you have seen it? So Physical Intelligence is a company, came out of UC Berkeley and Stanford. Actually, one of my students is one of the co-founders. And it's worth watching the video if you haven't seen it. They have a foundational model for the real world called Pi. And so this he sent to me a year ago. It's on YouTube, you can see it. This is 1XP. This is 3x speed. What I want to tell you is what's happening here is it's a foundational model. It's not like it's seen those pair of shots before or that washing machine before. It's been trained, and it's been trained using teleoperation. It's based in California, this company, and there are a bunch of new companies, and there's actually a colleague of ours at MIT, Pulkit Agarwal, is doing something similar based on simulation. This is teleoperation. There are two models. You train with teleoperation, you train with simulation. And this is teleoperation. And what happens here is that now it knows the primitives. It knows what a washing machine is. It knows how to open it. It knows how to fold a pair of clothes, right? And just as now with the new Comet browser that Perplexity just released, you have agents. These are physical agents. You can say, fold all the clothes and take the colors and put them to one side, and take the kids' clothes and put them to another side, and it'll do it. It's pretty scary, actually, and it's quite stunning. This is 3x speed. Just watch the speed, though, because that's a little bit misleading. It's still slow. Not bad, huh? I mean, those of you in robotics know how difficult this particular task is. This one is stunningly difficult. It's not programmed, obviously, it's figuring it out.
Looks good to me.
Let me go to, in the end, basically just to accelerate, there's even a piece where it picks up eggs, which is stunning, right? Peeling a cucumber, picking up eggs, those are sort of unbelievably difficult tasks. I just went and looked at their most recent video. It's worth watching. So now they take these robots into someone's house in San Francisco that they haven't been to before, and they release it.
All right, could you close the cabinet? Can you place the dishes in the sink too?
I think physical intelligence is now valued at $2 billion. They raised their first round at
Please clean up the spill.
470 million. They raised, I think, 70 million bucks, opening round. Pretty good, huh? I'll stop there. So what's happened is, I mean, I have more videos of things like this, but obviously you know what's happening with autonomous cars, right?
This is a driverless car, picking me up
You-
for the very
I
first time.
don't have to show this to you.
Of not worrying too much about my
Sorry. Here we've spent 100 years turning into humans into robots, and we've spent 100 years turning robots into intelligent things, and the real robots just showed up. So the impact on jobs, in my view, is going to be utterly devastating. This is where I want to go with this, right? We have literally reduced ourselves into fodder that the robots can eat. So I am very concerned about it. I'm going to show you this piece of statistics which blew me away. A company called Klarna went public recently. I don't know how many of you followed it. It's a fintech company. And about a year, actually 2 years ago almost, they literally put out this piece of statistics. This is in 2024, so almost 2 years ago, right? 1.5 years ago. They said that we have used chatbots for customer service, and they've handled almost 2.5 million conversations, done the work of 700 agents with better customer satisfaction scores or equal to humans, reduced repeat inquiries, and they work in 35 languages, 23 markets. Resolution time is faster, and they've saved 40 million bucks. Right? This was in February of 2024. So this is what we're confronting now with the capabilities of robots, and robots here taken more generally to include AI and robotics, right? And then, of course, we're on the threshold of agents now. I know there's a lot of hype about agents. Basically, the way I look at it, the traditional model was you had databases, you had software as a service, you had business logic on top. And what's happened with agents is you have, in my view, horizontal agents. These things orchestrate. And then you have these vertical agents, vertical bots that do something very specific. And that also controls the hallucination, right? So one way to think about it is for my trip, you might have an agent, and then you have Sanjay's preference agent, travel preferences, my frequent flyer miles, pre-check, my calendar agent. You might have my corporate clients agent. When I go to a place, whom do I need to meet? Who are my sponsors? And then you might have the airline agent, and that's already happened, right? So if you go to Kayak or something, that's already there. By the way, Kayak's integrated ChatGPT natively. They had a ChatGPT GPT, and now within Kayak, you can go in and type something like, it's my 30th wedding anniversary. I want to do something romantic in I was going to say West Lafayette, but I doubt there's San Francisco, right? And basically, the horizontal agent can talk to these vertical agents, coordinate, and do what you need to do. So this is the basic vision for agents, and this is already happening now. And the Comet browser, which came out 2 weeks ago, public release, is now the first consumer-level project. The ChatGPT agent is much more expensive, and I would say the Comet browser from Perplexity is probably closer to this. I want to talk a little bit about Doji. Obviously, this is something that roiled and caused a lot of concern, right? But I actually think Doji is actually a symptom. It wasn't, I'm not trying to in any way forgive the chaos, but really it's a symptom. Because what it is today, if you look at an insurance company, and I looked at an insurance company recently, they might have tens of thousands of employees. And you almost have to ask yourself, right, why isn't that company, and this is basically what they're trying to do in the government, why isn't that company just 50 people in a computer program? And these are the questions that will be asked now with these new AI native companies, which is cut down on the cost, right? Automate. Yeah, they lose some money. The consumer gets a little bit more money than they should because the agent didn't, squeeze them. Consumer's happier. And this is what's going to happen. And the impact on jobs is going to be absolutely spectacular. So now you can have an insurance upsell the horizontal agent. You have a customer profile agent, an insurance product agent, a legal agent, customer chat agent. It coordinates and boom, you have this system. And this is going to happen. That's why there's all this excitement about agents. Agents is just a way to say you create modular, smart things that you can assemble workflows with. And that may be the future of the corporation. So the implications on all these people who've been trained to be robots, when the real robots show up, is absolutely terrifying. And I believe we're at a moment in time when we need to fix education to take it on. So the third point is about education, which is we need to now get it right. We can't train human beings to be robots anymore. So what do we need to teach? Well, we already considered that spinning, weaving, and forging and the thin layer of, fine motor skills and a little bit of clerical stuff ain't gonna cut it. Because the ability of large language models to handle unstructured data, do language, pull in information is unprecedented and stunning. And that little layer isn't gonna protect people. Now what's happening is we need to identify what skills human beings bring. I was in a conversation with Janet and Farouk last night, and I'd love and thanks for the papers you sent last night, Farouk, but we really need to think about how do you build the things that make humans different. So this is a paper that came out of MIT, Roberto Rigobon and Paola Loiza, and they call it the EPOC framework. So the basic idea is that human beings are better at empathy and emotional intelligence, connecting with people. There are many frameworks like this. I just happen to like this one. P, I think it's a little bit contrived. They needed to get a nice acronym, EPOC. Okay, so they shoved some words in. I teased Roberto about it, but it sort of works. Presence, networking, connectedness. This is why we're doing this in person. Makes a difference. Opinion, judgment, and ethics. Creativity and imagination. Hope, vision, and leadership. I think that is underrated. Because one of the things that Farouk and Janet said last night was we do inductive reasoning, we do deductive reasoning, we deal with incomplete information, we have vision, we take leaps of faith. These are the things that AI cannot do because it's too damn logical. Many years ago, one of my technologies ended up, or a technology I'm sort of associated with, ended up in sports. So the National Football League uses ultra-wideband to track every football player. And I asked the lady who's selling that product, I said, how long before the coach gets replaced by AI? What do you think she said? Anyone? She said, never. And I said, why? And I was surprised by the answer. She goes, because the coach can get the players to do things no statistical or AI system can logically expect. They do superhuman things, right? So that's that last bit, hope, vision. It's that empathy and emotional intelligence. It does not compute. That's where we need to go, right, with humans. So to do that, we need to push our students. We have to, of course, teach them the basics, but really push them into these other things. As AI tries to grow into these other areas, and as AI has gone to those areas, we've seen reactions from society, like the Hollywood writers' strike, like the US dock workers' strike. What was the big fight there? It was robots. Unfortunately, we haven't had any success with ballet and robots, although Boston Dynamics is trying to get there. But maybe someday that'll happen. But with art, the lawsuit against OpenAI and Microsoft by the New York Times is an example of that. Recently, one of my colleagues contacted me. They did some research, and PLOS One refused to accept a paper because they said you may have violated the terms and conditions when you scrape certain news sites, because there's in the robot.txt file, there's a do not mine sort of requirement. And now we're all trying to come to grips with what it means to protect creative content, right? The tragedy of our jobs in education today is the following, in my view. If you look at robotic skills, unfortunately, this is what we're teaching. What we need to teach is complementary skills. Right now we're here and AI is getting pretty damn good. And by the way, AI is heading to the right. And that's where we need to go urgently if we're going to protect us, right? And that's what this thing was. I mean, there's one way to fix it. It's not the only way to fix it, but we have to fundamentally rethink higher ed. Now, higher ed is in trouble already for a number of reasons. I won't go into politics, you know what it is, but we need to reinforce this bit and put the learner at the heart of it and start investing in the individual, the child, the adult, the adolescent, to be prepared for this revolution. And to me, and you know, we got to stop saying teach, we got to say learn, right? Forming a model of the world. And to me, if there was one thing I could dedicate the next 10 or 20 years of my life to, it would be that. I have a paper about this. You can't really read this. I'll save time and just say that if you want, you can scan this. The paper's on the MIT website, and it's on how AI can be used in pedagogy. One of the challenges is I see a lot of gimmicky AI in pedagogy. It can make matters worse because learning, as you saw with the cat and the kitten, is a very delicate dance. The cat has to be just ahead of the kitten. When the kitten masters, if you have two kittens, and one's mastered the dead mouse and needs a semi-live mouse, and the other one hasn't, mom knows how to parse that, and every parent knows how to do it. And if we just shove AI in students' faces, it'll lead to a crisis of loneliness, et cetera, which is already a crisis in this country. So that's what this paper's about. So I'll just end with a few more comments. How are we doing for time? 10 minutes? Okay, it's a little tight, but I'll finish in time, I think. I think we have a couple of challenges ahead of us. We tend to think of the frontier of humans. You know, if you take a human being, you take, for example, do something accurately and do something fast, there's a frontier of how well you can do. The problem with AI is it doesn't follow that frontier. It's called the jagged frontier. It's a beautiful expression developed by colleagues at Harvard, Delacroix, Karim Lakhani, and a bunch of others. It's really good at some things, but it really sucks at some things, right? And in fact, Eric Brynjolfsson, another MIT guy now at Stanford, coined the term the Turing trap. So we fall into this trap of saying, we'll just replace humans with bots and they'll just do everything. No, it doesn't work that way because they're really good at some things, not really good at some things. So this is the struggle companies are going through right now because they just want to do a one-on-one map. They don't have the courage to think it through. The big companies, oh, can I just replace my financial analyst with AI? No. You can replace some components of the financial analyst jobs, but not the whole financial analyst. So Eric Brynjolfsson calls it the Turing trap. So the way I look at it, this is, you know, just imagine it's a little bit sort of impressionistic. So imagine that you have a job of painting the Mona Lisa, right? And all of us have a role, and that's a jigsaw puzzle. Each of us gets to paint one piece of the jigsaw puzzle. Problem with AI is it doesn't just take one of those jigsaw pieces. It apportions responsibilities differently. It says the bots show up and say, I can do that, and I can do that, and I can do that, and I can do that. And things the bots can't do, which are those things. So humans have to learn to morph, to work around robots, and do the things they can't do, which is what that framework describes. So we have to fundamentally rethink not just how we teach, but what we teach and how humans can work with robots, and that's that epoch framework is one example of how you can do that. So that's sort of one big challenge we have, right? In fact, right now, Microsoft, Satya Nadella, had to give the speech the other day where he was trying to explain to people why it is that Microsoft's profits are rising, but they aren't hiring people. If anything, they're cutting. And he came up with this terminology, which, you know, I guess he was sort of explaining it. He says, look at the words he uses. Progress isn't linear, it's dynamic, sometimes dissonant. I've never heard a CEO use the word dissonant in a speech because that's what everyone's struggling with. The good news is because large companies are struggling to do this, AI adoption has been slowed down. And that's why I think there'll be an AI bubble. Not because AI is not capable, but because systems cannot absorb it. And so there's going to be an up and down with AI. And it buys us time to get certain things right. There's another problem with AI. And I can do this graph here and nowhere else. So let me do it, okay? So the way I look at it, so this graph shows accuracy of AI, which increases with time, right? Hallucination, et cetera. On the left, you have error rates. So obviously, when accuracy increases, the error rates go down. Makes sense? Straight line, okay? Problem is, human reliance on AI. Human beings are weird, so many ways. We tend to over-rely when things are not very accurate. I have a Tesla. I got the whole self-driving package. The first month, I went full self-driving until I nearly died 5 years ago because the thing is actually very flawed. And then I was like, oh my God. And I work in the area. I was like, oh my God. And I sort of cut back on my self-driving. I only do lane holding. So what I was doing here was I was going to full reliance, although the accuracy wasn't 100%. So if you take the number of errors and the reliance on AI, it sort of looks like that, which is the number of errors actually goes up over time because we over-rely on it. And then when the hallucination, the errors go down, then it goes down, right? So I call that the cliff of adoption. And I'll skip over I have a whole thing on that. What I'm trying to say is that human-machine cooperation is much more difficult than we think. We need to be able to, again, I'm going to skip it, just say that when you go from fully manual on the left to fully autonomous on the right, in between, when humans and AI have to work together, it's surprisingly difficult. And there is now evidence of that. And we're just entering this phase, right? And the evidence shows up in many ways, and some of it is tragic. So this is a picture of a pedestrian with a cycle crossing the street, and the picture is taken from a Lyft car. An Uber car. And this lady died because the car hit her. There was actually a safety driver who wasn't paying attention, right? And that led to a lawsuit. And by the way, the Uber then got out of self-driving, decided to go with Waymo, sold off self-driving, right? So humans and machines working together, this dance is not obvious. And now it's showing up in other places as well. So for example, we're finding that with software, don't believe all the talk that somehow software is getting automated. It's actually surprising how mixed the results are about humans and software working together. But the most striking example is this one. Remember, Geoffrey Hinton in 2017 said AI will just wipe out radiologists. Did you know there's a shortage of radiologists worldwide right now? And we finally know why. The reason is when radiologists and AI work together, all that happens is the AI second guesses the human radiologist. So the radiologist says, I think there's no tumor there, and the AI says, I think there's a tumor. What's the radiologist going to do? There's a tumor, right? So the result is this overlap of humans and machines is a surprisingly difficult task. And I'm working in this area, but I really think this is a frontier we need to get into. Keep in mind that the human radiologist is board certified. And we as society give that person permission to make certain judgments. Driving is certified, we get a license. A pilot has a license, right? A doctor has a license, a lawyer has a license. And so there's an ethical and a accountability and a legal responsibility that AI can actually complicate. So this whole business of AI and human beings working together is not so obvious, and we're entering this period now. So look, in the interest of time, I'll just move on. This is my third last slide. This gentleman is a colleague of ours at MIT. His name is Hugh Herr. Hugh is the leading prosthetics researcher in the world. Hugh lost his legs in the White Mountains at the age of 19, below the knee amputations, and he's now very well known in the prosthetics world, and he proudly walks around campus in a pair of shorts in his prosthetics. And someone asked him, would you like, if God could give you your real legs back, would you take them? He goes, maybe not. Maybe not. I actually think these are better because they're robots attached to his leg, right? I saw him at a coffee shop the other day, and I said, how long does the battery last? So he just put his leg up and pulled the battery out and showed it to me. We were all a little aghast, right? But he says, these are better. I think the challenge companies have right now, and this is a very difficult challenge, and that's what's holding back AI adoption, is how many companies have the courage to basically amputate a piece of themselves and replace it with AI. That's the future that's coming. Unfortunately, I call it the bionic organization. And we need to be ready for it, and we need to prepare humanity for that. We are all used to being cogs in the wheel right now. I'll end with this. How many of you know there's a Degas exhibit next door? It's fantastic. Go have a look. It opens at, I think, 10 a.m. I think humans really, let me end on a high note, have an opportunity to thrive. Human beings have a vast context window. It's not just the 100,000, 200,000 tokens we can see. It is the things we observed on the way in. It's the conversations we had. It's that Degas exhibit, right? All of them sort of change the way we think. That's where we excel. Our differences, our flaws, and our glorious uncertainties, right, is what makes us unique. And it's not just cliche. It is true. I mean, just the Degas. Degas was a misogynist. He was an anti-Semite, right? He produced beautiful art. And the interesting thing is, if you go to the exhibit, you'll see that the gift came from someone whose first name is Avram, probably Jewish, right? So that's humanity. It's so complex. And this complexity is our saving grace. I'm not saying people should be horrible people, but our differences is what makes us work, and our multimodal mind meld that humanity sort of provides. Our ability to do inverse problems. Faiz talked about it. Many of you talked about it. We can do inverse problems, but in this multimodal way. And these are the things we need to train and educate the next generation on. And our approach to unstructured ill-posed problem, come back to what Janet and Farouk were talking about with me yesterday. And we need to build a new workforce that is ready for this bionic future. So I really think this is a very, very fundamental sort of moment in time. We need to teach students how to think. And unfortunately, that's the one thing we have forsaken. Last slide, second last slide actually. I think one more thing that's happening is there's a disconnect between industry and academia in the following sense. I've visited a bunch of AI companies recently, many of my students are there, and they're like, hey, we got it now. You guys can stop doing research, we got it. No, literally, right? You academics just slow, you do all these weird things. AI, we figure it out. I think that reminds me of the Daedalus and Icarus story from ancient Greece, which is, Daedalus learns to fly. He teaches his son Icarus, and Icarus gets all excited, and he flies too close to the sun, right? The wax melts, the wings fall off, and he dies. This is what's happening here. But the onus should be on us as academics at the same time to be very honest, to be very connected to the world, to the real world, to take on things like workforce education, to be authentic, to be realistic, because we can't live in an ivory tower either. I thought you said that very well, Harrison, yesterday. Look, I'll end with this. We have a new iron horse. We need to train it. We need to ride it. We need to learn about it. It is evolving with us, and we need to be hyper aware of what it's capable of, or I think we'll be run over by it. So I think I finished on time. Thank you very much.
I think that's outstanding, and I think we all need to take it seriously. However, at the end, you said we have to teach our students.
I'm a creature of habit, Farouk.
Okay. I don't believe you can teach people how to think.
You can lead people to think, yeah.
Provide an opportunity for students to learn how to think.
Absolutely.
Totally different. not even lead.
Yeah,
Okay.
I completely agree.
Thank you.
I mean, our words encode our biases and our limits, so completely agree.
There's one. It's Jared Butler from Penn State. Thank you for the presentation. I love this example you used of the cats and the kittens and this sort of engagement, which to me is very interpersonal, having learner and trainee and trainer as they're engaging together in these sorts of things. One thing I'm not sure I understand is what does that look like in a scaling sort of way? If you're moving from a couple students to 30 or 300 and our current model like that, what do you envision that sort of scaling problem looking like as we try to adopt this sort of approach?
Look, I mean, parenting is not scalable. That's why most of us have, only a few kids. Intentionally, anyway. The point is that obviously there are some things we can do, like a flipped classroom, project-based learning, reflection. Again, Farouk's done a lot of work on reflection, cooperative learning, internships, applied learning, right? Problem-based learning. There are all these techniques. So at least if we do them, we're taking a small step in that direction. I'm not sure it's completely scalable, but we can't ignore it, which is what we do today, right? I mean, the word lecture should be banished eventually. It's just it's such a, I think it's part of the tragedies, though, again, to Farouk's point, even the language. At MIT, our tutorials are called recitations. What do you do in a recitation? You go recite, right? So yeah, it's not scalable, but at least try. Let's try at least change the pedagogy somewhat, and then let's talk about scalability. Well, yeah. Well, look, I mean, also I think the class system, blue collar versus white collar. I spent come back from Asia where I spent 3 years, 2.5 years. That division is made very early. We've got to sort of merge that back because we're all blue collar, we're all white collar to some extent in this new world. I think that we will all have to do things by hand and learn by apprenticeship. The other thing is companies used to be in the business of apprenticing people. In America, they've sort of gotten out of that business and left a vacuum. So it's another thing that's got to come back. In Europe, in Germany, in Austria, something I've studied, there's a very healthy apprenticeship system, which also is somewhat more scalable than trying to recreate it in school. I think we've just sort of gotten so intoxicated on this explicit pathway where I can distill knowledge, come in and inject it into your veins in the classroom and then declare victory. We just got to back off from that. Not sure how far we can go, but at least let's stop doing that, right? All right, thanks very much. Yeah?